See, God often allows pain and suffering and the consequences of sin into our lives, but he doesn't do it because he's mad or because he just wants to get even with us or because he's just like sticking it to the man for us being stupid or whatever it is. Over and over and over and over again in Scripture, what we see is that a God who is in the Bible who is overwhelmingly good. He is patient. He's merciful. He is compassionate. He is slow to anger. He's not spiteful. He's not vindictive. He instead is loving. You see, more than anything, what we see in Scripture is that God desperately loves his people, that he is for them, that he longs for their good. He is not against them. You see, in understanding that reality, that has huge implications for our lives. You see, if you just believe that God is sovereign, if you just believe that he's in charge, that he's in control, but that he's not good, then you will know that God's in control, but you will think that he is just cruel, that he's spiteful, that he's vindictive, that he's unjust, that he's uncaring, that he is uncommitted, unconcerned, just like Naomi does here. You see, but that's not the reality about who God is. God is sovereign, but he is also incredibly good. You see, the problem is that like Naomi, in the midst of suffering, we struggle to see both of those realities. There's often times in our lives where we think that God is far from us, where we think that he might be powerful and in control, but that he's not good. But the truth that the book of Ruth keeps showing us over and over and over again is that it's in fact in the midst of suffering, in the midst of those very times of heartache and of pain, that God is sovereignly, powerfully working behind the scenes. He is laying a foundation oftentimes for the greatest demonstrations of his faithfulness to us. You see, chapter 1, it ends on this hope-filled cliffhanger. They've arrived in Bethlehem, it says, just as the barley harvest is beginning. You see, there is a harvest that is coming. And Naomi, she has no idea what lies ahead in those harvest fields for her. She's coming back. She's saying, I am empty. I have nothing. God is against me. But the reality is that in the midst of the suffering and in the midst of the pain that she is experiencing, in the midst of all of that, God is actually about to weave together in her story the story of all stories, a story of his blessing in the midst of her bitterness, a story of his redeeming purposes in the midst of her pain. Little does she know that this Moabite widow that is standing next to her, that she feels is not adding anything to her, is actually going to be for her a picture of the faithfulness and the fullness of God in person. You see, friends, the pictures that we have in the book of Ruth is of a God who is pursuing his people. A God who is sovereignly working behind the scenes, bringing about their good. I need you to hear this. In the midst of their rebellion against him. See, God often uses our own sin to bring about our own good and to show people his love and his kindness and his goodness. You see, in Ruth, what we see God doing is using Elimelech's foolishness and his rebellion and his folly and his running from God to set the stage for this demonstration of God's graciousness and his faithfulness and his redemption in the life of Naomi and of Ruth, and ultimately in the life of God's people as a whole. You see, this is the message of the gospel. It's that in the midst of our sin, in the midst of our rebellion, in the midst of our running from God, God is actually sovereignly setting the stage for his redeeming work in our lives. He's not waiting for us to clean ourselves up. He's not waiting for us to get our act together. He's not waiting for us to fix ourselves, to make ourselves ready for him. Instead, he is coming in power and in love to rescue us from ourselves.